Thank you, gentleman. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Doggett.
Thank you very much. Mr. Michel, though you and I have very significant disagreements about most everything you testified to, one thing that I do want to say is that you're to be commended for your candor in your testimony, and particularly that portion of your written testimony that you indicate that eliminating corporate taxes is a worthy goal, because I think that's exactly what these folks have been trying to do. They reduced the corporate tax rate by 60% in 2017, and of course for those multinationals that have stashed so much money down in the Cayman Islands, $60 billion in 1 year, and are only paying 0.6% in taxes, they've gotten very close to your goal of just eliminating corporate taxation on those monies. And defending this kind of system assures that we'll have more of the same kind of tax scam. And Mr. Barnes, I want to ask you about some of the arguments that I've heard from my colleagues. One of them has been, well, why didn't the Treasury Department just go over there to Europe and get exempt every tax credit that we have? Don't you suppose, Mr. Barnes, that if we ask for that, that every other country would ask to have every credit and preference and loophole in their tax code exempted as well, so that the idea of a minimum tax and stopping the race to the bottom would be totally meaningless?
Well, I suspect, thank you, I suspect everyone in this room has been involved in negotiations. In tax negotiations, whether it's tax treaties or a negotiation like this Pillar 1, Pillar 2 exercise, every country comes with its sovereign interests, and the idea that the U.S. can completely bully its way through is, I think, a false optimism. Yes, we have a lot of authority, but if our take it or leave it is all of our stuff is good, other countries are going to insist on the same approach.
We can't just be a go it alone if we want to be a true leader in the world. And the other argument that they make is, well, we've got this guilty tax. Why didn't they just go over and get it accepted and approved? And I know that some negotiations are still continuing, but the guilty tax has a few loopholes in it. One of them is that they blend the country by country instead of defining the results country by country, and that allows for a great deal of subversion from the whole idea of a minimum tax. What's your feeling about the failure to just totally exempt guilty as it exists today? The same guilty, by the way, which, as I pointed out from the joint tax analysis, those are the 88 multinationals that are now paying under 8% as their tax rate.
Well, it's important to recognize that the guilty tax paid by U.S. corporate taxpayers is counted in the calculation toward the global minimum tax. So it's not like the guilty tax is on top of the global minimum tax. It simply has not yet been deemed sufficient to eliminate any need to compete and comply with the minimum tax.
In your opinion, would the adoption of a global minimum tax, the Treasury has been advocating what's called Pillar 2, would it diminish the competitiveness of U.S. businesses?
I think the answer is no, and I realize I may be an outlier here, but let me give a concrete example. A U.S. company invests in a low-tax jurisdiction, Switzerland, Singapore, a real business, $500 million, 1,000 very skilled workers. Because of Singapore's tax incentives, there's zero tax. A Singapore-owned Singapore company pays zero. A Dutch-owned Singapore company pays zero. A U.S.-owned Singapore company pays 10.5% under guilty. That's our rules today. The U.S. company is handicapped by 10.5 percentage points. A global minimum tax may cause the U.S. company in Singapore to pay a little more tax, but it will bring up the tax for the Singaporean-owned Singapore company and the Dutch-owned Singapore company to 15%. In that environment, I'm quite confident the U.S. company's subsidiary in Singapore will be very successful.
Well, thank you for your example. Just overall, if we set a reasonable minimum on taxation, we would be competing with other countries not on whether we could have a race to the bottom with the lowest possible taxes, but on things like education, our justice system, our workforce, our ability to do research and development here, and I think the United States would lead that competition. Thank you very much.